Hi, this is JB Cycles with a bonus video on cycles. Today I'm going to talk about the reason why we have cycles in the stock market. So we know some cycles. We have the daily cycle, night and day, and the seasonal winter-summer cycle. And these cycles we know very well, we feel them, but they are not always perfect, like the winter and summer cycle. We can have a early summer starting in the spring, or the winter can stretch out into May, at least here in Norway. But on average, we know there will be a winter coming every year. And the cause of this cycle is obviously it's our planetary orbit and rotation. So it's about celestial bodies, and of course the main reason is the sun and our interaction with the sun. But there are several factors that we can't see and feel that well, and we have electromagnetic radiation, our planetary magnetic field and variations there, and we have particles emitted from the sun through the solar wind, and so we have some interaction cycles with the sun, and many of those we can't see and feel that well. Also, the sun itself has cycles, but we won't get into that today. So the two cycles I will talk about today, and the possible cause behind the seasonal variation that we see in the stock markets, I will look into today. Here I have the S&P, the seasonal variation calculated in the period 1983 to 2016, and I have detrended this seasonal variation, and we see we have a bullish bias into summer and bearish into the fall, and then again bullish. So can we find explanation to this seasonal variation through the Earth-Sun interaction? Our planetary orbit is not circular, it's elliptical. So in the summer, actually we are, or at least in the northern hemisphere, in the summer we are farthest away from the sun. So the density of the solar radiation is the least. And in the winter, actually, we are the closest to the sun. So if we make a hypothesis of that high density of solar radiation is bullish, then we can draw here a red period, a bearish period, and a green bullish period. So in this period here from April to October, we are farthest away from the sun and we have low radiation density, so that's a bearish period. And in the fall, late fall and winter, we are close to the sun, we have higher radiation density, and it's a bullish period. And the reason behind this, well, I can't really say, but the solar radiation interacts with the ionosphere, and it interacts with our magnetosphere, and who knows what this can induce on the ground and so that's the one factor. The other factor is the semi-annual geomagnetic variation, and we have one period here around the equinoxes, or I should say two periods around the two equinoxes. So around October and around March we have two periods where the geomagnetic field is vulnerable to the solar wind. So around midsummer and New Year, the Earth's magnetic axis is tilted, or the magnetic field is tilted in a way so it resists the solar wind better. But around the equinoxes, the solar wind can penetrate the magnetic field and cause more geomagnetic disturbances, aurora borealis and northern lights. So let's make a hypothesis that these periods of geomagnetic vulnerability, that they cause irrational behavior. So then let's put this into the seasonal variation. We can see that the bearish period here extends longer, it overextends, so to say, and the bullish period starts a bit later than expected and then overextends. So a possible explanation is we have a bearish bias going into October, and then we are hit by the geomagnetic instability, which causes irrational behavior. So we are kind of in a downtrend, and then the geomagnetic period causes capitulation. And when you have capitulation, you need a little bit time to reverse the trend. And the same the other way. We have a bullish period, we have high solar radiation, and then we get into this irrational behavior where we have irrational euphoria stretching this trend. So we see we have bullish trend, and then it starts to flatten, but then we have the irrational last pop up, and the other we have a bearish tendency, and then it starts to flatten here, but then we have the irrational period where we capitulate down. So this is just I don't call this a cycle, this is a seasonal variation, but the sun itself has cycles. So although in the winter we have a high density of solar radiation, it could be that the sun is sleeping. It doesn't emit much radiation, because that's a much stronger factor than the density variation. And the other way around, in the summer we have a low density, but maybe the sun has a cycle where it's very active. It has a high output of solar radiation. So although the density is a bit lower because of the distance, the radiation itself is very high. So one has to see these two together, and the interesting part is when these components coincide. So like now we have cycles being very bearish around October, and also the seasonal variation is very bearish in this period. You should also recognize that when we have stock market cycles working over decades or centuries, there has to be a major driving force behind these cycles. Otherwise they would not be there so consistent over such a long period. It's just that we can't see these cycles, we can't see the reason behind them. Also, these cycles should show up in other things like climate cycles, earthquakes, and many other things. Hope this was interesting. See ya!